Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Homeland, the series where we explore all things Israel and those people making a huge impact. And I can't think of anyone greater than the one and only Hillel Neuer, who is a Canadian-born international lawyer and executive director at UN Watch, which is a human rights UN watchdog organization based in Geneva. How are you, Mr. Neuer? It's great to see you.
Thank you. All is well, and thank you for having me.
You know, it's a real privilege for me. I know you have many, many people following the work that you do, not only with relating to Israel, but relating to advocacy for many international war crimes and human rights issues, from Darfur to many other areas in the world, whether Cuba, Nepal, Israel. You've always been at the center of it, and it's quite amazing. And I'm curious, just to begin, if you could tell our watchers a little bit about the work that you do. How did it all begin? How did UN Watch come about? Because it's an inspiration to see.
UN Watch was founded by a great civil rights leader named Morris Abram, who was an attorney in the US who stood arm in arm with Martin Luther King early in the movement in the 1950s and 60s, and eventually became a US ambassador to the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. And when he retired in 1993, he had the idea to establish UN Watch, both with the universal mandate to hold the United Nations accountable to the principles of its charter, to promote human rights for all, and to fight the demonization of Israel and anti-Semitism at the UN, which unfortunately is pervasive at the world body.
It's quite amazing. In a certain sense, it's almost ironic. It was the United Nations that first kind of put Israel that mandate to exist right at the beginning. And now this is the body that is causing a lot of upheaval and trouble for Israel. How did that change? Why has that happened?
Yeah, well, that is quite true. The UN General Assembly was the body that voted to create a Jewish state in 1947, and at that time, the United Nations was seen as favoring Israel. Well, the world body changed. A lot of dictatorships joined in the 1960s. The Soviet Union had a Cold War that did not exist. Well, it existed in 1947, but for very peculiar reasons. At that time, they voted for the Jewish state. But by the 1960s and 70s, the Soviet Union, together with dictatorships, the Arab states, began to use the automatic majority that they had to turn the United Nations against Israel. And today you have a situation with a great many Islamic states that did not exist necessarily in 1947. You have 56 Islamic states. They're the ones that, for example, last week introduced a special session against Israel here in Geneva at the Human Rights Council. It was Pakistan for the Muslim states. And they have almost an automatic majority, both from the Muslim states and dictatorships that vote with them. China, Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, all of them automatically vote for those countries. So that's the situation today, where almost any resolution against Israel will get an automatic majority. Sadly, the European Union and the UK often join in, but not always. Last week, there was a split. There were, thankfully, no EU country voted for the resolution. The UK and several other countries voted no. Some countries abstained. So that's the situation today.
You know, we've just come out of a war in Israel, and its tensions are almost palpable with the current conflict. Rise of anti-Semitism like we have never seen in recent years just exploded here in the United Kingdom, I think across the world. We've seen terrible attacks across the United States. And could you perhaps share with us your view of this conflict and the kind of the two wars that we're fighting, not only the physical war, what's going on with Israel and Gaza, but the world war against anti-Israel on campus and everywhere in society? And what's kind of your view and take on what's happening?
Very scary to see what happened in the past few weeks. Indeed, I'm not sure if we witnessed this level of anti-Semitic threats, bullying, and violence. Terrible things in the UK, also in the US, countries that are historically seen as among the most favorable for Jews to live in, for Jews to walk around wearing a kippah, to be proud of being Jewish. The fact that people in New York or Los Angeles have to think twice about whether to be visibly Jewish is shocking. I mean, if you can't be safe in New York, where can you be safe? So it's really shocking to see that. And indeed, there is a connection between the incitement against the Jewish state and the violence that we see against the Jewish people. Those who are marching on the streets, if they feel that they're being legitimized by congresswomen or by things in, in the BBC or in some other elite institution, if they see the United Nations condemning Israel, if they see major media demonizing Israel, accusing it of being an apartheid state, human rights groups like Human Rights Watch, whose head of the organization, Ken Roth, is pathologically obsessed with demonizing Israel every day. If they see these elite institutions joining in and demonizing the Jewish state, then those who support the Jewish state or Jews, because Judaism is about Israel. Israel is a key part of Judaism. You cannot divorce the two. There are people who would like to think that you can, but anyone who knows anything about Judaism, if they say a blessing after eating bread, they will talk about Jerusalem. Judaism, a major part of Judaism is Israel. And so we see that when Israel is demonized, Jews are demonized and they are attacked. And it's a thin line between the demonization and the physical violence. And I think that's very scary. And I hope that people who are reckless in demonizing Israel will think twice, because the result is empowering in the region Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and genocidal terrorist groups. And it also legitimizes and empowers those in Western countries who are attacking Jews.
You know, I must tell you, I've watched you speak at the UN, and I know these clips have had millions of views on YouTube, online. I want to share a short clip of this with our viewers now, if I may.
Israel has used the worst kind of abuse, ethnic cleansing, and imposing a regime of apartheid.
Israel continues to exercise apartheid in Palestine, which constitutes a crime against humanity, violence and terrorism that are being exercised against the Palestinian people.
These violations include the building of apartheid walls to legitimize the theft of land and to Judaize Jerusalem.
The separation wall is an example of the apartheid policy practiced by Israel.
Israel's practices of discrimination as well as extremism.
United Nations Watch, have the floor.
Mr. President, let me begin by putting the following on the record. Everything we just heard from the world's worst abusers of human rights, of women's rights, of freedom of religion, of the press, of assembly, of speech, is absolutely false and indeed Orwellian. Today's report does not consider Israelis to be deserving of human rights, consistent with the approach of this Council, where today's notorious agenda item against Israel completely ignores their human rights. Now, over the weekend, President Abbas announced he was giving his highest medal to Rima Khalaf, who resigned from the Economic Commission of Western Asia, a Beirut-based UN agency of 18 Arab states, after Secretary General Guterres rightly instructed her to remove an absurd report which accused Israel of, quote, apartheid. Mr. President, why is Mr. Abbas celebrating a report written by the notorious Richard Falk after his own Palestinian mission here tried in 2010 to remove Mr. Falk on the basis that he was, quote, a partisan of Hamas, as we know from WikiLeaks? The accusation against Israel is absurd. Israel's 1.5 million Arabs.
Delegation of Palestine has the floor.
More than one statement goes beyond the mandate of this sitting, using unacceptable terms about Ms. Rima Khalaf, and so we would like this to be stopped. We have noted some terms which are humiliating vis-à-vis the Council, and we call for the respect of our traditions within the Human Rights Council. Thank you.
We would support the viewpoints that have already been expressed by the State of Palestine as well as Egypt.
Now the previous speaker can continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Israel's 1.5 million Arabs, whatever challenges they face, enjoy full rights to vote and to be elected in the Knesset. They work as doctors and lawyers. They serve on the Supreme Court. Now, I'd like to ask the members of that commission that commissioned that report, the Arab states from which we just heard, Egypt, Iraq, and the others, how many Jews live in your countries? How many Jews lived in Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco? Once upon a time, the Middle East was full of Jews. Algeria had 140,000 Jews. Algeria, where are your Jews? Egypt used to have 75,000 Jews. Where are your Jews? Syria, you had tens of thousands of Jews. Where are your Jews? Iraq, you had over 135,000 Jews. Where are your Jews? Mr. President, where is the real apartheid? Why is there a UN commission on the Middle East that does not include Israel. From the 1960s and the 70s, they refused to include Israel. Where is the apartheid, Mr. President? Mr. President, why are we meeting today on an agenda item singling out only one state, the Jewish state, for targeting? Where is the apartheid, Mr. President?
Watching that clip, I must tell you, I just want to give you a hug because thank you so much for what you're doing for the Jewish world. But I want to understand from your perspective, first of all, it must be requiring quite a lot of courage to stand up there and to speak out when you're surrounded by those countries' representatives, listening to you directly eye to eye. Is that terrifying? What's that like? And what's your security detail like as you leave the room?
Well, I've been doing this for a number of years now, and so I'm used to it. And I go into that room. I have a mission, which is I get, maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes. That's why I have to speak quickly. People should understand. I used to have 3 minutes, and it's been declining. And I have a mission in that room is to speak the truth as I see it. And I try to focus on the work that I have to do and not pay attention. But it's true, it is a hostile room. There's dictators in the room who don't like me very much because we speak out not only on Israel, but on human rights in Venezuela and in Pakistan and in Iran and in Venezuela and countries around the world. So there's a whole bunch of countries that really don't like me in the room. There's European countries that may not like me either because we will disagree on certain issues concerning the Middle East, certainly, and other things as well. And then you have NGO activists. Sadly, a number of them are radical left. The current head of Amnesty UK, her name is Kate Allen, and she, her partner for some 2 decades was Red Ken. So basically, the former mayor of London, who was very anti-Israel, possibly anti-Semitic person. So, you have Corbynite views that are pervasive in many of the major NGOs, such as Amnesty. And so those people in the room as well despise me, both because we speak out for equal rights of Israel and because we're not, inherently anti-Western or anti-capitalist and all that sort of thing. So they really despise me as well. So there is a lot of hatred, but it's not pleasant. But one focuses on the job ahead and tries to do that as best as we can.
This particular series, it's directed at really everyone, but specifically younger members of the community who are really struggling. And I'm particularly conscious of younger members on campus and in the workplace, people barraged with hate of Israel online, on social media. What would you advise them? I mean, I've heard some people say, guys, just keep a low profile, keep your head down, keep quiet. I personally feel they need to speak up. I'm curious to know what advice you would give them, and how can we give the younger members of the Jewish world the tools they need to do the type of things that you do?
Right. Well, look, I can't tell people what to do, given each person has to assess their own security situation, how it could affect, if they're speaking up in a class and their grades and everything. So I wouldn't think to tell people what to do. But personally, my instinct was to speak up. And historically, certainly for the Jewish people, keeping quiet did not help a lot. The German Jews in Germany were known to want to get along and go along to get along and try to assimilate in a very extreme way. And that didn't help very much in Germany. And you could look at other countries as well. Those who tried to keep quiet and not make trouble didn't necessarily fare very well in the history of anti-Semitism. So I think people should speak up when they have the chance. And there's many ways to do it. Today there's social media. There's ways to organize in university in various ways. And there's so many different opportunities. People can be creative to spread the word. And I think people should. Of course, everyone has to, we saw some physical anti-Semitic attacks, and people have to be prudent and not open themselves up to being attacked. So everyone has to assess their own situation. But having said that, I think one should be proud in one's identity. And if we don't speak up, those who know the truth and who will.
Absolutely. I know that you were given an accolade of being one of the 100 most influential Jewish people in the world, which is a big accolade to have and a big responsibility, I guess, as well. What would you say you consider your role to be, and how do you measure the success of your work?
Well, my role is I'm the head of UN Watch, and you know that's my role, and we speak up for Israel's right to be treated like every other country. And sadly, that means we have a lot of work to do here at the UN, where Israel is constantly singled out. Here at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, there's one agenda item for the whole world, 193 countries, and one agenda item for Israel alone. No other country in the world is treated that way. So that's the reality at the UN, and it's my role to speak out against that, just as we speak out for equal rights of individuals around the world if they're being persecuted, whether it's in Venezuela or Burundi or Zimbabwe or Pakistan or Iran or China. So our role has both a particular mandate and a universal mandate. And for us, it's what the UN should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. And you asked me something else as well.
How do you measure your success?
How we measure our success? Thank you.
They're still doing it. They're still doing it.
How we measure our success? Well, pardon?
No, in other words, they're still singling out Israel. How do we kind of...
Yes, it's happening every day. Now, in terms of measuring our success, there's different ways that we measure our success. One is you can do quantitative things. If we get millions of views on YouTube, you know, we've had more than 20 million views of our videos on YouTube. So that's one way of seeing that the word gets out there. You know, if a video gets 500,000 views, well, then maybe it's Rabbi Yoni and his friends and my cousins who watched it. But once it gets, you know, 5 million views, that's really getting out there in the world. And a number of our videos, whether it's the son of Hamas and Colonel Kemp and different videos that we've had, have gotten millions of views. So we know that the message is getting out there. And we also look on, you know, other social media metrics, those who share our material on Facebook and Instagram. And I encourage everyone who's on social media, which is everybody, to follow UN Watch. We're on Instagram. I think it's United Nations Watch on Instagram. And we're on Facebook as UN Watch. We're on Twitter and my own account, Hillel Neuer. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, increasingly on Instagram, to reach a different audience, younger audience, people who aren't necessarily on Twitter. And we're on Facebook as well. So please follow us. It makes us stronger, share our material, get the word out. And that's one way of measuring our success. The other way is, you know, we try to lobby countries to vote the right way. So once in a while, we can have some pressure, mobilize some pressure. And we saw the Netherlands change their votes on certain things. I think at the World Health Organization this year, they voted with Israel instead of against Israel. And that's in part by some awareness that we raised in the Dutch parliament. Got a lot of people upset when they didn't do that last year. So from time to time, we think we can influence certain votes and you know, educating world opinion. We're quoted in the media maybe 600 times a year in major media. We're just in the Associated Press today about Syria being elected to the executive board of the World Health Organization. This is a regime that bombs hospitals, that kills medical workers, killed maybe 900 medical workers in the past decade. They do it deliberately, and they were elected to the executive board of the World Health Organization. So we're quoted in the Associated Press on that today. So getting the word out is another way to measure our opinion. So I think there's both quantitative and qualitative checks, seeing if results happen, sometimes diplomatically and sometimes educating public opinion.
Wow. Maariv, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a privilege and honor to meet you, and I hope that we can invite you at some stage to visit us in St. John's Wood, and we can meet you in person.
I'm a big fan of St. John's Wood. One of the first places, it's the first place I visited a number of years ago when I first visited London. So I have friends there, and I congratulate you on the important work that you are doing in your community, and that, you know, the British community, the Jewish community, is very strong, very important community, and they've lived through difficult times with Corbyn and things happening recently, but they've shown great resilience, and it's a very rich community, not in the physical sense, the material sense, but in terms of the Jewishly and culturally, such a strong community. And so I wish them continued strength. Chazak, chazak.
Thank you so much.